What's going on, ladies and gents? This is Bento with another Steam controller playtest, and this time I'm going to be trying it out on the Resident Evil remake, or HD I guess for some. So I thought the Resident Evil control scheme was a pretty old control scheme, so I thought it'd be pretty fun to try the Steam controller on. I will be mostly using the old school tank style control scheme because I think it actually functions quite appropriately for the Steam controller, but I'll explain that more so when I go over my actual setup. So for my actual control scheme, I am using a pure gamepad setup, and the only reason I do that is because there's no mouse input whatsoever for this game. And the control scheme is actually very typical of the what you'd find for Resident Evil on the regular gamepad. So in this case, the left trigger is to shoot, to aim. I actually have a dual trigger function, so I did alter things a bit. My soft pull actions to aim, and the hard pull actions to shoot. And the reason I have that is because the left bumper is used to switch between targets. I thought I'd just be more comfortable that way instead of having to use my left middle finger to aim and then my left pointer finger to switch between targets. My right bumper is used to bring up the map. The left trackpad, I actually have it set for the regular D-pad on the gamepad. So in this case, up would be to move forward, and then left and right would just be to turn. And then if you hit the back a bit, Jill will just move backward. I am also using an outer rim function. So if I were to actually hit the outer rim, I have it set to sprint or to run, so she'll actually run in this case. And then if I were to use the outer rim on the back, she'll actually do a complete 180. I thought it'd just be nice to update that a bit instead of having to use the to press another button to run, which is actually on the X button. So if you're walking and then you actually press the X button, she'll do the run. But I do like the outer rim function better. For the right trackpad, it is my mouse movement. I don't know if my capture will show it to you guys, but it's just there for whatever reason. I honestly don't use the right trackpad at all. And similarly, I don't have any motion controls because it's kind of useless to use in this game. Maybe if you want some button functionality, but I just don't really see the point. For the face buttons, the Y button is to bring up the map. The B button is to reload and to cancel. So when I'm aiming and then I press the B button. A button is to interact, but I can't interact right now. And the X button is again just to sprint. For the grips, they're actually more useful for the old school style controls, where if I'm running, I actually have my left grip to turn left, my right grip to turn right. And so if you do want to use the old school style controls, I think that'd be much more useful instead of having to like hit left and right on the D-pad. And my start and select buttons are just to access the option menu. Oh, and the left thumbstick is actually just to move for the alternate control scheme, so you can actually just move this way. But if you want, if you want to use both, you can have your alternate control scheme on your left trackpad or left thumbstick and the old school on the left trackpad. Again, I guess that's just up to preference. You can use it however you want, but I just have this is just very typical. So let's show you guys some actual gameplay. So this portion of the game is very early on. It's when Jill has to kind of like look for a whole bunch of keys and then open a whole bunch of doors in order to get access to the more inner parts of the mansion. So while using the old school style control scheme, it actually works very well using the double grip buttons along with just pressing up on the D-pad. I actually think this style control scheme is really good at introducing new players to the old school style controls. Granted, of course, they can just use the alternate, but I guess if you're kind of feeling nostalgic and you want to, feel the pain of how much it felt when we first played Resident Evil, I guess maybe this might be a good way to put it. I guess the old school style of controls kind of made the game more claustrophobic, and so you kind of get that really dreadful feeling of having to move and maneuver around zombies. But that's just me personally. Using the D-pad as it was used, back in the day, still feels okay. I just think the grips add a lot more comfortability in your turning. And I am using touch for the left trackpad, so that might also play a factor. With me, I just had a bit of an issue trying to feel around where the up button was. But the nice thing about the Steam controller on the left trackpad is that it has a cross shape groove, so that way you can remember what segment of the trackpad you're on. I guess the one advantage to using the old school style controls, and I'm pretty sure there's been like multiple arguments about this since the game came out, but having to move forward instead of having to use the alternate controls where you can freely move wherever you want. I think it makes a little more sense when you're moving between areas because the camera style changes. and that way when you hold forward, you know you're moving forward. Whereas sometimes if you're just holding down to move from an area with the alternate control scheme, it'll change up a bit and you're holding down, but when in fact you're actually moving up. And so I think that's one advantage, but again, it's just all up to preference. Overall though, I did enjoy this control scheme. My favorite part is still just having to use the left trackpad with an outer rim function, so the D-pad pretty much. I like that I can sprint when I need to and walk if I need to. Although I do kind of sprint a lot just to move away, I do like that if I don't hit the outer region on, say, the back button, I can just move back really slowly. That way, in case I don't want to do a complete 180 and it might cause a zombie to like latch onto me, I can just move out of its range and I should still be fine. Puzzle solving also felt fine. I mean, it's kind of still Resident Evil-ish, so it might be a little clunky, but nothing too bad though. I guess if you want to use motion controls, you could implement a D-pad style of input. So maybe you could tilt the controller up to aim or tilt the controller down to aim. However, I'm not a fan of using it because if you want to use it to aim left and right, you kind of have to do a lean with the controller, and so it kind of just feels unnatural. And so that's primarily why I mean, I did try experimenting with motion controls for Resident Evil, but nothing really worked out. I think something you could also do is change the face buttons to be on the right trackpad. And since Resident Evil doesn't use any mouse style of inputs, you could just have it as a face button style of input. So that way the Y would be the top of the trackpad, the A would be the bottom, etc. And that way you can just rest your thumb on the trackpad without having to like move everywhere else. Instead of having the turns on the grips, you could also probably put the left and right turning on the right trackpad. That way it might feel more natural to some players. So we're just about finishing up here, guys. I think the Steam controller works well with Resident Evil. The only thing is though is that you're pretty much emulating a regular gamepad, so there's honestly nothing new. But if you do use the Steam controller, there's still some added functionality of using the outer rim functions, the dual triggers. You're definitely not going to get much out of the motion controls, but I still think it's fun to use otherwise, especially when I get to use the grip buttons for turning. But that's all for me, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.